This is GrantTalk, hosted by Libby Hikind, founder and CEO of GrantWatch and author of The Queen of Grants.
I'm Libby Hikind, founder and CEO of GrantWatch.com, and I'm also the author of The Queen of Grants, From Teacher to Grant Writer to CEO, and I am your host today on GrantTalk. With me for our B2B segment, Business to Business, is Matthew Berkowitz, and he is a business advisor for G&A Partners. And why is that so special? G&A Partners is a professional employment organization. And we've wondered over the years whether we should or should not look into that. And the reason why I've invited him to our business to business segment on GrantTalk is because there are many PEOs out there today, and we need to investigate and understand what they're all about because they help nonprofits and small businesses. And of course, you will evaluate which PEO you, as a business owner or a nonprofit executive director, that you might want to look into. But let's find out what a PEO actually does. Will it be helpful to your organization or to mine? So welcome, Matthew. And why don't you tell us, what does a PEO do?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Libby. I really appreciate the time. A PEO is, like you mentioned, a professional employer organization. And what a PEO does, in its essence, is it allows companies to take their payroll, their HR, whether it's their HRIS or even outsourcing parts of their HR to the PEO, as well as their benefits, their health insurance benefits, into one solution. The main benefit for many companies is that many times, as you know, nonprofit or a small business, they go out shopping for health insurance. And the rates are what the rates are. In New York, for example, if you're under 100 employees, you're in the small group. So your rates are independent of your health of your group or the demographics of your group. And normally, in a lot of cases, they're very expensive. So what a PEO does, it allows these small groups to come together into one larger group, which allows us as the PEO, G&A Partners, or any PEO out there to have better buying power for health insurance. So what that means is the rates potentially could be much lower than what these companies would get on the open market.
And how many full-time employees does a nonprofit or business have to have before they look into a PEO for their health insurance?
Yeah, the rule of thumb is really, I've seen companies as large as 600. I've seen companies as small as 5. But I would say the majority of the PEOs that I've seen and have worked with are somewhere around 10 employees, full-time employees, to about 100 or so, maybe a little north of that, right? And then the rule really and this is across the board, is that you need 50% participation in the health insurance plan. That's usually a big key driver of the PEOs.
Today, we have a lot of people working remote.
Sure.
Or hybrid as a result of COVID, and it still stayed with us. And so you have where a business or a nonprofit might have independent contractors, you might have part-time workers and full-time workers. So while maybe the staff that's watching this could say, why don't we have a PEO, right? And why don't we have health insurance? But you get down to the wire when you start counting full-time employees, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And to your point, a PEO is not a silver bullet for any company by any stretch of the imagination. It's an option, right? And it's a very good option for many small and mid-sized businesses. And to your point, Libby, right, where now things during COVID, right, it used to be that people would be in one office, right? So if you were in Florida and you're running a nonprofit, you know all the laws when it comes to Florida. But now you have remote workers across the country, or you're starting a nonprofit and you're hiring someone in Utah. You as the employer don't know exactly what the laws are in Utah, and that's a risk for you as a company. So a PEO actually will help you from a compliance perspective to make sure that you are in control and you know exactly what's going on and you don't make those potential mistakes.
And every time you hire somebody in another state, you have to open up payroll on your QuickBooks for that employee, right? And there are all sorts of rules and different percentages, and QuickBooks does work with you, but just from my own knowledge, sometimes my accountant is on the phone for an entire day getting back and forth between the IRS, QuickBooks, the Department of Labor from that state, getting everything set up. And sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes it's very difficult. So you handle all of that as a PEO.
Exactly. Yep. Soup to nuts. We make sure, we always say it's hire to fire, right? Everything in between from the beginning to the end of the employee life cycle is something that the PEO handles.
So what happens if there's a mistake? If you get a letter and the employee, for whatever reason, has gone to an attorney, what happens to the business?
Yeah, so the PEO is actually a co-employment model, which means that the PEO, like G&A Partners, is a partner with that business. So we have skin in the game to make sure that you as the employer are handled and taken care of properly. So that's even before the action, right, that we're doing everything within compliance. But even after the action, right, if there is a potential lawsuit or anything like that, we're there with the company to help support them and make sure things are taken care of, and even potentially provide legal services as well, depending on the situation.
So how would I do payroll if I had a PEO? What would be different? Because and also, do you have a system for a timekeeping process that takes screenshots? Because I know a lot of the businesses that are working remote and listening to this podcast have some kind of remote timekeeping process.
Yeah, we don't have, to answer your last question, we don't have necessarily a snapshot type of program, although we can potentially integrate with maybe ones that, folks are using. We do have the ability to track hours. Even we have the ability to do time clocks if there are places, maybe not in the nonprofit place, but maybe in the small, mid-sized businesses, right, that need actual physical time clocks, we can do that. But to your point, the PEO is a full-fledged, not only people outsourcing, right, where you get people with your package, you also get technology. So you get that payroll. For example, if you're using an ADP or a QuickBooks, that cost that you're spending, and in QuickBooks it may be limited, but if you're using another payroll provider, those costs would go away because they're all now encompassed within the PEO. So you get not only a payroll system, but you get an HRIS system as well. So employees can now onboard, right? And it would be an electronic, modern day onboarding experience where they sign up for benefits, they enroll in benefits, they make sure they fill out all of their tax information. It's all done within the system for the employee and then as well for the employer.
I interviewed Elliot Rosenfeld from Netis, and we talked a lot about cybersecurity. How secure is this?
Yeah, our PEO, for example, has over 100,000 worksite employees. And the software we use, the base of it is used by, I would say, millions of worksite employees. That's definitely something that's constantly being evaluated from a firm level, because as we house a lot of personal information, bank information for employees, so it's definitely of the utmost importance. And then on top of that, actually, we just introduced the cybersecurity insurance policy that'll cover maybe some local breaches to the company if they have something going on their end as well. So to your point, cybersecurity is always being thought about within our company. I'm sure others as well.
That's really great that you're taking care of that in that way. So tell me about health insurance that you would offer as opposed to the marketplace. Because over the years, we've looked into this so many times, and I've heard that from other nonprofits, and they find that the marketplace is actually less expensive for the employee than the business taking out a policy.
So that's a great point. It really depends on the strategy, right, of the business. So if I know many nonprofits, they run lean, and sometimes salary is an issue or whatever it is, right, where they can't be necessarily competitive with the private market. So what we've seen a lot is that nonprofits actually go out of their way to offer robust benefits in order to attract and retain top talent. So one of the things we always talk about is that, yes, the employee can go to the open market and get their own benefits to the exchange. Or even if the employer wants to go and, like in New York, and go to the open market and buy insurance for their entire company, we tend to offer, and we do offer, Fortune 500 level benefits. For example, like high deductible plans or low co-insurance plans, low co-payments, right? These are the things that you might be able to find in the Fox Newses of the world, but you may not be able to find in the smaller businesses. And then on top of that, we even offer ancillary benefits. dental, vision, long-term disability, short-term disability, even pet insurance now for some of our clients. So that, again, these are these robust benefits that would either be very difficult to find in the open market or would be very expensive. So that's really where the PEO has found their niche when it comes to helping these small and mid-sized businesses.
But is it more expensive or less expensive when you compare marketplace that an employee of a small business would pay privately compared to if you wanted to give them the same value with the PEO?
So again, it all depends, right? In many cases for us, the employer has to contribute to the benefits, right? So in many PEOs, the employer has to contribute at least 50% of the lowest plan, right? Because we want the employer to have skin in the game. So for your example, if it's one employee that just needs health insurance and the other employees are on their spouse's plan, yes, to your point, maybe it's more cost effective for the employer to help out and give maybe that employee a stipend instead of offering a full breadth of health insurance for the entire company. But it really depends. And also the way the secret sauce between a PEO is that each PEO underwrites each group individually. So we take a look at the health of the group, the demographics of the group, to see if this is a group that would make sense to bring on to the PEO. So to your point before, it doesn't necessarily fit everyone. Sometimes it is more expensive to be on a PEO, and maybe then it makes sense to still come on the PEO because you want the HR compliance, you want the payroll assistance. But then sometimes it may not make sense at all because it's just too cost prohibitive. So, but I always say it's worth looking, right? If you're going to look for health insurance, look at the open market and look at the PEO and just do the comparison and see benefits versus the cost and run the analysis.
My comparison model would be take a look at how much it's going to cost the employee on either plan, and then say, well, it doesn't, because there's no reason for the business to contribute to something that's going to cost the employee more, right?
Correct. I would agree with that.
Right. So first we have to just compare the numbers and see. And the only way to get those numbers is to make the phone call, right? And find out how much it's going to cost them. And I usually wait till the end, but I want to just ask, how would people reach you?
Yeah, so I'm available. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Matt Berkowitz. You can find G&A Partners. You could hit me up on email, mberkowitz@gnapartners.com, or my cell phone, 718-986-1824. I'm always available to reach out, to speak to, and really just help, right? I pride myself on being consultative in my business approach. So if it makes sense, great. If it doesn't make sense, we shake hands and we move on as friends. So always happy to have a conversation with someone.
And I think that's wonderful. The GrantTalk listeners and viewers have access to someone to discuss all of this and can go on and see what's better for their business, what's better for the employees. And I read somewhere that you do something with compliance with volunteers.
So I think it goes back to the same thing we talked about before, right? Like opening a nonprofit is even more complicated, right? Because you have the part-timers, you have the volunteers. Maybe the volunteers have to be on payroll, maybe not, because maybe they're getting a little bit, or there's a workers' comp issue potentially, right? Or a liability issue. So having someone...
Right. If you bring a volunteer into your nonprofit and they should fall or something, what's covering them?
Exactly. It's a risk and a liability. So having the PEO, having the people to reach out to and speak to and work this potential issue through is valuable, right? It's not a lot of people come to a PEO after something happens, right? They're being sued and they're like, oh no, I don't want this to happen again. That's probably the wrong way to look at it, right? It should be before it happens, before the issue happens. Let's head it off. Let's cut it off at the beginning and make sure that these things are not an issue going forward.
So you have attorneys and accountants at your disposal in the PEO?
So we have within our PEO, we have an HR specialist, which would be the client's one-to-one contact. And then behind that HR specialist are a team of other specialists. So there's a risk and safety person, there's a payroll person, there's a regulation person, a compliance person, a benefits person, right? And they're able to interact either directly with the employees themselves, right? If the employees themselves have a question, they could actually call us and ask. And if they have questions on their benefits, they don't have to bother the executive director or the HR person at the company because they're doing more strategic things, right? Let's offload the tactical and let our people be more strategic. And then for the employer as well.
Over the years, GrantWatch is in business since 2010. So over the years, I've had to call an attorney once or twice, and I had to pay a retainer for that attorney before he would even speak to me.
Sure.
And then we had our conversations and I was on the clock. But here it sounds like if somebody is a member of a PEO, they have access to ask all those questions without having to pay a retainer.
Yeah, listen, I don't want to oversell it, necessarily say that you have like full-time legal help at your disposal, but we do have professionals that have dealt with this for many, many years. And then we can advise you, hey, maybe we need to bring in an attorney or something like that, right? Maybe this goes above and beyond the scope of the PEO, but instead, to your point of just calling a lawyer right away and spending that money, we'll make sure that you're not doing that if you don't need to.
What about the NDA that a company has? Does your organization review the NDA under the human resources, the HR component?
Yeah, so we can help with NDA. We can help with HR handbooks, right? There's stuff that we can either help customize, or we can ensure we can have we have a templatized version that we can give out. So all these things that are given to the employees, either when they're starting or not, those are things that we can help review and make sure they're compliant, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of non-competes, non-solicits that go out there, right? And maybe they don't fit the local laws, and everything's changing.
Right, and intellectual property, that changes all the time. What is, what isn't, what can be used. Social media posts when you're part of a company, what you can post, what you shouldn't post.
Right, and if you have an employee that posts something they're not supposed to, and you maybe need to fire or discipline them, you want to make sure you do that within the legal limits so you're not sued. So now you can consult your HR professional and say, hey, listen, this person posted something, derogatory on social media. What should we do? How do we handle it? And making sure you're within the legal confines to do the right thing is super important.
And on a fun side, when we talk about days off, paid time off, and setting up calendars and so that everybody knows which days and which aren't in the beginning of the year, I'm sure you can help with that as well, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the PEO is really all-inclusive, right? So we can help with paid time off, make sure it's tracked by the employees, tracked by the employer. Even on top of that, right, we can actually build out learning and development systems, right? We partner with other firms. So if there's trainings that you want to offer to your employees, whether it's mandatory trainings like sexual harassment, or even something like Excel, right? We want to help them work on Excel or PowerPoint. We have modules that we could build on top of that, or even performance reviews, right? A lot of companies now are doing quarterly performance reviews, annual performance reviews. We could bolt that onto the system as well, and that could all be inclusive within their entire technology package.
So in a PEO, do I negotiate with you one price if I'm looking for a PEO, or each individual thing we just spoke about, do they add on and build up the cost? Yeah,
so in many cases, there's the health insurance premium, right? That's separate. And then there's a per employee per month fee, right? So that could range really depends on the setup, on how many employees and everything like that. And that usually includes the payroll and the HR and the PTO system and the HR person, right? Then when we start talking about other modules, that's to your point where we usually bolt that on, and there's usually an added price. But again, it's like anything, right? It's all negotiable. You can always work with the company and see where it fits within their budget, and then really include it into that per employee per month price.
And all these costs are legitimate business expenses.
Sure.
So it's pre-tax. Well, I'm not an accountant, but it is the pre-tax part of your business. So it works that way as well. I'm going to look into it myself and see. And we've looked into different things over the years, and it's just always been less expensive for Marketplace, using Marketplace, because we have a very mixed bag of, as I said, consultants, part-timers, full-timers, and all over the United States since COVID. As everybody else, we went remote, and we were able to get talent from many different states. But it's cumbersome. It really is. And sometimes I'm like, maybe we should just employ someone from our state. But then we find somebody in another state that's really valuable to us, and we want to go with them. So it is complicated what we have to do in small businesses. And I know somebody could say, well, I'm not really a small business. We make a lot of money and we're doing well. But the small bit, unless you're like Apple and Microsoft and X, you're a small business, right? That's just, for whatever reason, that's the term. You have to think of yourself that way.
Yeah, correct.
And you have to grow, you have to have somewhere to grow. And so we do grow, and sometimes after 10 or 12 years, you say, I don't want to do payroll anymore, or, I don't want to be managing my own HR because I'm making some mistakes, and you need somebody to speak with. So that's when you can take a look at this. And as you said, it's not for everybody.
Right.
And it's so really wonderful of you to hand out your phone number and your availability as a business advisor to everyone that's listening, and they can find out for themselves and evaluate which PEO is best for them. And you're just one PEO of, like, how many are there out there right now?
There's a lot. I've seen statistics anywhere from 600 to 900 nationally, right? So it can be daunting. You can't look at them all. So sometimes you got to work with a select few and see if it makes sense. And even if it didn't make sense, I know that there's someone in my network that I can help it make sense for in maybe some other fashion. So it can be definitely overwhelming for any small business, mid-sized business, even large businesses, right? Mm-hmm. All of this stuff gets overwhelming, especially when you add in so many different choices. But yeah, I definitely pride myself on trying to be consultative in that approach.
So if somebody's looking for a PEO, we want to give them some tips, because you said there's 600 to 900 of them. What should they look for?
Yeah, so a lot of what we talk about are certifications, right? So there's now two main certifications that I would say. There's a certification called ESAC, which is a private organization which has basically evaluated PEOs to make sure that they're solvent, make sure they're in good standing. And then there's another one called CPEO, which is actually from the IRS. And they've done pretty much similar type of analysis, but it's government rated. So I would say look at PEOs that have those types of certifications, because that'll give you some peace of mind.
And we're going to get the spelling from you later. So
we got the spelling from
while you're watching this, you'll see these mnemonics up on the screen.
Yeah, and G&A Partners has both of those. I would say also there are a couple. One thing that we pride ourselves on is our NPS score, another acronym, which is our Net Promoter Score, right? What are our clients saying about us, and why are they staying with us? Do they want to stay with us? Would they recommend us? And those are types of surveys that we do that are anonymous. They get sent out to our customers, and then we take them back and we see what the feedback is, and we really take that into account. So.
Okay, so this is how they can compare you to other people, because we are not saying that anybody should use any one PEO, no. But you should, as a small business owner or an executive director of a nonprofit, you should definitely look into this and see if a PEO is something of value to your organization, as we will as well at GrantWatch. And we thank you, Matt, because it's been very valuable. Is there anything else you'd like to tell our listeners?
No, I think to your point, it makes sense to really look at this and look at others, like you mentioned, right? Like, I think just to look at mine or one is silly, right? Look at a few, make sure it makes sense. Look at the financials, do a full encompassing analysis. If you're planning to offer benefits or you already offer benefits, just take a look and see if it makes sense.
Okay. And I want to thank you. Did a great job of educating everyone. And to my listeners and viewers, I want to tell you that if you want to see more business to business on GrantTalk, click that subscribe button on your screen. You can watch us on YouTube. You can watch us on grantwatch.com/GrantTalk, on Spotify, iHeart, or Apple. And stay tuned for the next episode as well. Thank you so much, Matt. And congratulations on the great work you do for nonprofits and small businesses.
Thank you, Libby. Thank you for having me, and continued success on everything that you're doing.
Thank you for tuning in to GrantTalk, powered by GrantWatch. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this GrantWatch channel. Please consider subscribing to grantwatch.com, and you can find the book, The Queen of Grants, by going to grantwatch.com/book. Thank you again for spending your time with us.